see that. Meeting is now live there, but I can't see it on.
Right.
Oh.
So we're almost live on YouTube. Let's stay here in a minute to just kind of have an introduction on YouTube, and then we'll switch to.
And I can't. Oh wait, I'm tagged in. I can't see you live yet on Instagram.
Beautiful. Okay, so we're live on YouTube.
No, I can't
That's
see.
done.
I can't see you live on Instagram yet.
No, not yet. I'm going now.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay. So, well, it's a pleasure to thank you for taking the time to do this, Adah. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see also what the conversation is going to, where the conversation is going to go, because we've already had them, and I know that there's many connection points that we have both in both our universes. So I'm excited for that, and I'm also excited just to see kind of the collective evolution and see the questions of people and all that. Yeah. So let's get. I'm going to start my YouTube, my Instagram live now. So
okay,
and we're going to get to hear you there. Okay. So I'm going to stop hearing you on the Zoom. So if you want to turn your volume down now, that's good. Okay, Instagram, let's go. YouTube here, Instagram here. Hello, Instagram. Hello, everyone. Hello. Those of you joining. Bonjour, Séverine. So we're going to have a wonderful conversation with my friend Adah Parris. She's in London and she's about to join us. And she's an incredible thinker, futurist, activist. There she is. Hello. Hi, Adah. That worked well. Welcome, welcome. Yes, right. We were connected years and years ago through the cross-modalism community in London. We have lots of common friends, and it's only been since last year that we kind of started knowing a bit more about where we're at. Oh, there's Najib. Najib is here on the live. Hello, Najibu. Our friend Najib is yeah. Yeah.
So this is an opportunity for us to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I like how you see it. Yeah, what a time to be alive. And I simply feel kind of inspired by seeing how much your voice is being kind of all over, bringing deep insights. And I want the audience here. We have folks from all over the world to connect with your work, and I know that food is something that connects us, right? Yes, in our works.
Definitely.
We were even starting to think about eventually collaborating on actual experiences. So the senses and food. So what does two words, kind of those concepts, mean into your work?
We'll start with a small question, right?
Yeah.
Like,
right.
What is the meaning of life?
Feel free to start wherever. This is just a question.
I see life as an experiment. I always have, and as alchemy, and the mixing. I am a person who very consciously experiences life through my senses. So I touch everything and I smell everything, and I didn't realize I was doing it, but I orientate myself using my senses. So I walk into a space, especially a new space I don't know, and a couple of friends have told me that I walk into a space, and the first thing I do is I'm kind of looking around and smelling and touching and feeling and kind of going, okay, which bits of this feel comfortable to me, feels like home, or which bits can I connect with? And then it's also interesting that if anything is then, once I've settled into that, I've grounded myself into that, if anything moves or switches, I know without having to look, I just feel it. And I feel that I'm probably similar with food. It's a similar experience with food. Food is, you know, I love cooking. I love cooking, and I think what I really enjoy about cooking is that I definitely see as alchemy. I
Mhm.
love the different ingredients coming together at the right time to create this new, um, sometimes unexpected,
Mhm.
you know, this unexpected form of magic.
Mm.
And I, but I also believe that I think the way one of the ways I express my love for people is to cook.
Mm. It's
Is to
true.
cook. Is to, you know, and I know that if I'm in a bad mood, is I might as well not cook,
Hmm.
because it doesn't matter how many times I've done it before, and it may be one of my favorite recipes. But if I'm in a bad mood, then all of that goes into the food.
Hmm.
And now that I'm more aware of that, I also consciously don't want to do that. And so it's the same. I think it's a very similar thing for me, is that both of those things are about a heightened sense of awareness and a
Mm.
heightened sense of connection with ourselves and ways of expressing. Because
Yeah.
as somebody who can be very verbose, and you know, I talk a lot, I know this, but also I'm very much connected, and I think this is where I know that your work really inspired me when we first met, is that there's this non-verbal communication. And
Yes.
that is, I think, sometimes more powerful than actually using words.
Absolutely, I love that. And also, so I'm seeing that folks from Algeria, Turkey,
Oh,
Colombia,
oh, the food. I'm just
Mexico.
thinking of the food.
Yeah, no,
Hello,
so
everybody.
exactly,
But I'm thinking,
right?
my mouth is actually watering with the
Just
thought of the flavors and the
of
smells.
cultures,
And
right?
yes,
Yeah, and so
yeah,
that's what's wonderful, and I'm so grateful to have had this opportunity to be on Netflix, because then I,
yeah,
it opened the door to many folks from many people, many
yeah,
sorry, many cultures around the world to connect on this platform, which where we talk about food science, food activism, food art,
yeah,
and that is where what you were saying about this feeling of how you communicate emotion, or you communicate a state of being in community through
mm-hmm,
food, and
yes,
how you sense the environment, which just says how sharp kind of you are in your senses and in your body, right? Which is
yes,
something that we've lost, and yet it is something universal, something that everyone watching here, everyone in the world, we all have this very ancient part of our
yes,
cognition, of our
yes, yeah,
ability to perceive the world, which is sensible
yes,
to our senses, connected to our senses, right?
yeah,
And connected to this the importance of food, and something that we have forgotten in the past century, I would say, more than anything, right? And
and
this is where the
but
work
I'd
comes.
add to
Yeah,
that that we have also become lazy.
yeah.
It's not just that we've forgotten, we've become lazy and we've taken the easy option out, which is to depend on digital technology to try and provide that quick fix.
Hmm.
And so that's where, you know, you and I started to reconnect, is the recognition that we've been using digital technology as a quick fix to try and shortcut some of that process. But you can't shortcut the enjoyment of having eaten your favorite meal and the smells. I mean, you start to eat the meal before you actually put it in your mouth. And we
Hmm.
can't, you know, these are things that our ancestors have been doing and we have been doing for years. But then we get to the point of, I'm too busy to eat, I'm too busy for this. And that has such a massive knock on effect, not just in terms of our health, but in terms of our ability to connect with other people.
Yes, it's almost as if our awareness was just here in the head, right? In most cases, and it's by
Yeah.
society, right, and not in the body. It also
Yeah.
connects with this. I often mention how the father of modern psychology, William James, he
Mm.
invented or kind of put forward experimental psychology, so the scientific study of the mind, who said that only sight and hearing and audition
Mm.
were interesting to study because they were the senses that elevate our souls, while the sense of taste, touch, and smell were the more older, right? The
Mm.
animal senses. And hence they were not that interesting because then it was just about understanding our animal past. And that is where modern psychology was born. Now,
Okay.
that is why we have probably 80% of the scientific research on the senses
Yeah.
focused on audition and vision, which is also how the world is ruled through
Yeah.
media and through
Well,
technology, right?
but it's also how we as humans try and colonize everything.
Mm,
The ideas
at a
of,
distance, yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's I see this, and so I'm going to put a label on this. I'm going to give it a name because then I own it. I have
Mm,
been the one to do that. And actually, all of these things have, the plants and everything else has been here before us.
mm,
And but our idea of connecting with things is to put a name or a label on it that makes us feel more comfortable about the way that we connect with it.
absolutely. That's beautiful. And so, how does this feeling, right, as an artist, as an activist, as a human awake, like working today, how does that synthesize into what you're doing with ism,
Yeah,
that earth, and how is that kind of with this concept of cyborg shamanism, which I find, it's like one of those ideas where you just read the two words and you're like, huh, there's something like you learn something just by reading the two words together,
yeah,
right? And I'm sure that some folks in the audience who saw me talking about it were like, oh, this is the first time I hear this. It's interesting. So how does that connect into what you want to do now, what you're doing now?
yeah.
Mm,
So I'll give a bit of context. Cyborg shamanism is it was five. It's I say it's the result of 6 years of mind mapping, but actually that's not true.
mm,
It's actually a lifetime of experiences that have gone into it. So for the last 6 years, I was looking at our relationship with technology and how the way that we use technology and tools as we are looking for some kind of enlightenment to
mm,
connect with ourselves, or to connect or to make sense of our own relationship with ourselves, our relationship with others, and our relationship with our environment. And so, if you looked, I was working in the tech world, but if you look at the idea of a cyborg, that is somebody who uses physical technology, quantum, algorithmic, or digital technology to augment themselves, to make themselves smarter, future human, what have you. And I was looking and I spoke to a guy who's a cyborg and asked him why. And he was talking about the fact that it helps him to connect with himself, his environment, and others. And if you then, because I know people in the shamanic world, I said, well, it's a very similar relationship. It's a very similar behavior that you are using shamanic tools to ayahuasca, plant medicines, what have you, to connect with yourself, environment, and others, and so recognizing that the behaviors are the same. We're all trying to gain a sense of enlightenment, whether it's through
mm,
food or, whatever our tool is. I see that as a technology because that's
right.
the thing that's helping us to make that switch or to get to that place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided that recognizing that what that means is that if the behavior is the same, there's no hierarchy. So all of them are equal. And so why can't we bring all of those different things
Mm,
together to try and solve problems? And so that became the journey of recognizing that actually there is no hierarchy. All this stuff that we see in the media, that this is the way forward and all of that, they're all, to me, they're all valid. All the different tools and technologies are valid, which means that there are people who have different knowledge or insights, you as a food activist, that can help us solve the same problems because we're
mm,
all working towards that. So, what I've been doing more recently, as you know, is initially it was cyborg shamanism, and that became a systems design framework about
mm-hmm.
how you actually make that change. It's also, most stories that we are fed in the West are based on this framework of the hero's journey. There is one hero who is out on an adventure, who meets the guru or the shaman or what have you, who gives them some guidance for them to carry on the adventure. What cyborg shamanism does, and now the isms network, which is bigger, says that all of us are on that journey and we all have different elements. We're all the hero or the heroine of that
Mm,
adventurer, and we are all also the guru and the shaman and all of that. We
mm,
occupy both roles because one would not exist without the other.
yeah.
And so it's helping people to recognize that we have the power and we have the
Mm,
opportunity to take responsibility for changing, for creating the stories that we want. We don't need to wait for somebody else to come along and say, this is what happened. Look at where we are now in this pandemic. Before, pre coronavirus, which is how we will refer to it, all the stuff that we thought was normal, we've now realised was bullshit. The isms that we were told was a load of
An
crap.
illusion.
It was an illusion. You know, if we look at the economic structures, now we can clearly see that that was only built, you know, it's only been built and maintained for the 1% of the 1%. So if we recognise that all of that was crap, and we spent a lot of time focusing on being nostalgic, make places great again, or the empire, or all of those things, or we were trying to leap so far forward into the future, trying to predict trends, and this is what we're going to do, and we're going to colonize Mars. I mean, so we were in this either the past or the future, and this whole pandemic has made us be in the present. We have to be in the present now. We can't distract ourselves with all the crap that we used to, and that's where people panicked, because suddenly recognizing that, oh shit, well, I can't distract myself. I can't go outside, and all the stuff that I used to do, like going to a bar and go shopping and all of those things, doesn't exist. So you then start to ask yourself, eventually when you calm down, after all the Zoom meetings and what have you, you then start to ask yourself, well, who am I? What's important to me? What's the impact that I want to make on the world? And I feel that that is why I was always working on launching Cyborg Shamanism and the isms. But when I recognized that this is what's happening and this is the opportunity, I decided to just push ahead and launch it. But it's also important to note that I think that this is why the Black Lives Matter, right now, is having such a global impact, because that space was made by the coronavirus and everything that's happening for this. You know, we were in that space, that liminal space, and then George Floyd and everything else came into that gap when we're already asking ourselves as individuals and as societies, who am I? What's important to me? What am I willing to stand? What's the impact I want to have in the world?
Yeah.
And that's why it's happening now.
Wow.
I mean, you asked the big question, and
I know.
I mean, if I was cooking, then it would be, you would be smelling the flavors, the smells, or if I was music, it would be
No, that's wonderful. You really took us on a journey there. Thank you. Wow. So there's a lot to digest. I'm even seeing comments, people kind of applauding, some others kind of agreeing, and some others saying like, I don't understand what's happening here. Which is okay, because when we talk, for example, about liminal spaces, when you'll need to understand about rites of passage, you need to understand about ritual. So if you don't understand everything that Adah was saying, well, then welcome, join us, follow, and
ask questions.
More and more about this, because this is really what's the real deal of what's happening during this century, is something of a deep state of reckoning our place as humans and our place within an ecosystem. And how many of the relationships that we have that make a life are broken, both to the natural environment, to the water streams, and to each other, right? And that maybe new narratives, new isms need to come on board and help us make sense of the world, in order to make sense of what's our journey and how we choose to take a stance during this lifetime. Because we're all here, if we're listening to this, we're all alive, hopefully, and that means that we have a voice. Something that I want to point out and eventually invite you to dig deeper, because it really resonates with my inner life, is this idea that we've been disempowered by the hero's journey story. In a way, the hero's journey, so for those who don't know, it's basically a narrative, a story, like a blueprint that has been used by all the greatest storytellers. So from
almost
Jesus
movie,
to Luke Skywalker,
everything,
right? Jesus, Luke Skywalker, Harry Potter, it's a hero's journey. You go on a journey of transformation, you meet teachers, and you fight, and you meet the dragon, maybe you slay the dragon, and then you come back to where you started, a different person, an upgraded person, right? And that's kind of the whole narrative arc on which many of the stories are based. Now, just that as a bit of a background. So we're moving away from that, in which we're not just waiting for the masters, for the guru, for the religion, eventually for the God to come and tell us and teach us, but rather we are the kind of wounded healers is another
Yeah.
metaphor that I've heard, right? We are the people who are like, okay, I can be a warrior, but I can also be a healer. I can also
Yeah.
help others. I can be helped. I can help myself. I
Yeah.
can find something inside of me that is sacred that can help myself, right? So
Yeah.
I'm my own guru, in a
Yes.
sense. So, and I
Which is,
feel that
I have a
truly
friend that
empowering.
says, I have a friend that says we are all shaman.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that, recognizing the language and connecting with what you're saying inside of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and also, Katie is just commenting. Most of those heroes that we have in these stories are white men, which is
Yeah.
another of
Yeah.
the things that
Well,
that
not just white men.
perpetuates.
Not just white men. They're cis white men. So they
Mm,
are a particular type of
yeah,
white man.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and this is what cyborg shaman, as you recognize, this is what cyborg shamanism is about. Is it's recognizing to bring those different voices, those different understanding, those different backgrounds, those different ways of self-identifying into the
Mm-hmm.
conversation at the design process bit at the start.
Okay.
So
Mm-hmm.
helping people, we have to redefine what the problems are. We can't wait for somebody else to tell us this is the problem that you're experiencing, because they're coming with their own biases and understanding and everything. We are the ones who are living this, and we are the ones who need to recognize and understand. Okay, so now I see that it's the what's the parable of the elephant, where the people see the elephant from different positions and they just see it as different things. But when you come together, everybody shares their viewpoint. You all get to realize it's actually an elephant that you're seeing, not just a particular perspective. And I
Mm.
think that that's what needs to happen.
Mm. Ecosystem thinking.
Yes.
I love the inspiration that colonies like bees, right, and how
Yeah.
they operate. Which first of all, they're matriarchal society, and there's a queen that
I mean,
everybody serves
of
in
course,
order for it to work, right?
queen
Which
bee,
is
right?
queen bee. Um, but there's something about that state of being,
Yeah.
like a life form that operates like that. The forests, right? Mycelium,
Mm-hmm.
and we are here, humans, kind of put in a tramp by the narratives that have been created in the past centuries and some past millennia that make us separate from everything else, that
Yeah.
did not take into account the everything that makes a life possible, a life of objects, a life of cyborgs, right?
Yeah.
Because we are in a way cyborgs. We're all here kind of
We all are.
holding our phones in our
Yeah.
hand. It's like an extension of our brain and our
Yeah.
telepathic capacities, just like in a device in our hands. So yeah, it's I'm excited. I'm
But
excited. And so,
I
yeah.
think that part of the problem is that our ego gets in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Our ego gets in the way of our ability to recognize that in the grand scheme of things on this planet, we as humans are actually inconsequential. We're tiny in relation to everything else that happens here, but we have decided that we are the powerful ones and we are going to colonize and take, and label everything, because the idea that the planet is here to serve us is ridiculous, but the way that we treat it, it is. That's the way that we're treating the planet. It's this, our ego is, a certain amount of ego I think is okay, but when ego starts to get in the way of the decisions that are made that govern us, that tell us what these isms are, and perpetuate them through media and through the way that we are able to connect and express ourselves, that's the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so how does this manifest in the coming decades, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a certain, I mean, we could talk about many different ways, right? And there's the arts, there's how business is transforming, there's of course the
Mm-hmm.
circular economy ideas, there's the regeneration
Yeah.
happening with regenerative agriculture, and other kind of regenerative principles applied to human systems. There's politics, right? And that's the overarching narratives,
Yeah.
sustainable development goals to achieve altogether. There's good things, right?
Lots of, yeah.
But so, what's kind of your, how would you define your field of battle, your field of action? You don't need to answer. It's just like, feel like whatever
My
you.
field of action is
Mhm.
to curate the the battlers, the warriors, the shaman. You know, I recognize patterns. I didn't, you know, I don't believe that there's any new ideas. I have been very blessed, fortunate in being able to recognize some of these patterns and being able to speak some of those different languages to be able to bring people together to recognize that what they're focusing on is actually the same as somebody else. It's just that you speak a different language. And so, what I see my role as is one of curation, of one of collaboration, of bringing people together. Because, you know, for example, you know, you and I had the conversation about with the isms, you know, as a food activist, and then wanted to connect you with Karina, who is an engineer and a jazz improv singer. And when she was describing the experience of being on stage and singing jazz improvisation, I went, well, that's a meal to me. That's food. That is the way that you describe that, the nuances and the flow and the story. That's food. And so me being able to recognize those patterns and to make those leaps quickly is what I'm doing then is I bring people together to try and create, because the way that we've been trying to address these problems in the past hasn't been working. It hasn't been getting the traction that it deserves, which I think is different than it hasn't been working.
Very good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And so by bringing in people from sometimes polar opposite worlds, I think it starts to change people's perception of the validity of it. Of actually, if I bring in an engineer and a food activist to talk about innovation, first of all, that blows their minds because it's not anything that they've seen. But actually seeing how these worlds are actually interconnected, and it's only us and our egos that have kept them separate.
Yeah. And the more diverse the viewpoints are, the more we get to the innovation that often is not something that comes from egos, which is another idea that we have. It actually comes from the air of time. It comes from, I like to calling it like just, and I've heard it said, like it's something that wants to emerge in the collective.
Yes.
And then some folks just grab it and bring it to life, right? Because they see it before the others. But it's really something that wants to emerge.
So that's how I feel about Cyborg Shamanism. It took 5 years of waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning with a word in my head and not knowing what that word was or why this word. But it was that being in between that, I'm still asleep, but I'm not quite awake, and that space in between. And I remember I just used to wake up and there's a word and I'm repeating it so I don't forget it. And then I wake up and write it and put it on my mind map. And a lot of it was that, just dumping those things out and then starting to look for the connections. And it felt like this was emerging, and it took 6 years now. But it's just like our conversation I said at the beginning. It had to happen at a particular time, not when we met all those years ago.
Yeah, ideas all have their gestation time, right?
Yes.
There's the seed that comes in contact, and then it takes time to really come to fruition. But so there's something I want to point out is I feel and I appreciate how connected you are with your intuition, right? Because many of these things are, as you said, kind of, it's been 6 years, but actually no, it's not been 6 years. It's all a whole life, and my DNA expressing itself in a particular form now that allows me to know that this is more likely to succeed than this, right? This is better than this, right? And it's all kind of like 1-0 games in the end, right? And data in a way,
of course.
So and you having this, I love this idea. I'm back. Sorry.
Yes.
I love this idea of really the importance of sharpening your intuition, our intuition as individuals and as collectives, because then a lot of ancient wisdom is allowed to speak in a way through that. I really appreciate that. Well, is there anything else you would like to share with us in what's kind of moving in your world now in the coming weeks, months? I mean, in a few months, I would hope that we can co-create together and
Yes.
curate. And
Yes.
I'd be honored to be, curated
Well,
by you to come
I
and
mean,
collaborate on something. So
yeah, I definitely, I think that's why we got back in touch, was this idea. There was a nugget of an idea of collaborating on a food experience, which I would absolutely love.
mm,
Um, I think where things are for me at the moment is still recognizing that we're in this pandemic, but not seeing it as a lockdown, seeing it as a period of metamorphosis.
mm,
We are in a space where we can make. We've always had choices. We may not feel like we've had choices, but there's still been choices, and we can choose now to ride these waves, because there's some ups and there's some downs, but ride these waves and try and collaborate and work and decide, create new stories. Excuse me. I'm following one of those waves at the moment. I'm surfing at the moment. Um, so I've built the basics of the ism community.
mhm,
I'm turning it into a consultancy, and I'm working on that. And the whole idea is that collectively we will address the different isms
mm,
as they arise. So the one that we're focusing on at the moment is racism,
mhm,
and how do you deconstruct that, and what are the value systems there, and what is the hypothesis for change? How can we, what is the hypothesis for change? And then we start to look at, okay, so now that we have this, who do we need to speak to try and make these things change and make these happen? Which is where I think our collaboration would come in, because looking at how could we create an immersive experience that takes people on a journey of empathy and understanding and deconstruction of. I mean, at the moment, for the last couple of weeks, I've been running lots of sessions on anti-racism and diversity and inclusion, and I've started by saying that in order to understand racism, we need to understand what came before.
mm,
And what came before, because racism as a concept is only 1920s, but
mhm.
before that was colonization, and that was 1500s. So
Yeah.
you've got that whole period of time that, in between that, to try and understand. And I think the way that my brain works and recognizes patterns is to think about, how do we then take these big complex ideas, and this is where we started, that big complex idea, and turn that into a multisensory experience, so that people understand it by, for want of a better way of putting it, ingesting it.
Mm, yeah. Right.
The process
Mm,
becomes the experience of eating becomes part of the learning, part of the history.
mm.
Yeah.
And that's what ritual. I mean, as you talk about this, I can't. This word ritual keeps on kind
Yeah.
of screaming,
Yeah.
right? Because that's what it is. It's also something very ancient. I'm thinking, how do we make this in a way that is not just a beautiful kind of sessions of meals for relatively privileged people, to making something that could eventually become more reproducible in a way that more
Scalable.
people can get to these insights, because I've seen it how simple rituals, when done
Yeah.
collectively, it become a very powerful experience of being like, oh wow, bread is sacred, right?
Yeah.
I have bread, I am grateful, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Something as simple as that, right? And with others, and sharing from the same loaf of bread, which now post COVID it's going to look interesting to try and break a bread, but
I mean,
um
well, I've got to just make a point about that. So during COVID, there's been so many people baking bread and what have you. And I just went, what happened to all the people who said they were gluten intolerant? Because I haven't heard anything about that recently. Everybody's suddenly going, I'm baking bread.
yeah, right, the shift in narratives.
Yeah.
There's a few interesting questions here triggered by KT
Okay.
on the thread. Maybe we can talk about this.
Yep.
I think folks are curious about the hero's journey, right?
Yes.
And
Okay.
how would you change the hero's journey, and what does that look like, right? If we're
Okay.
not having one hero in a story, right? What 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 what
What's
what
an
is what?
alternative?
Yeah, what's the alternative?
So the framework that I've seen that I use in the Cyborg shape, the isms framework, there's 5 steps. And the first one is leave. So leave behind the old, rather than trying to redefine what the problem is, just recognize that there's a problem and then work out how you're going to leave that behind. So deconstructing whatever that is, get rid of it, leave it. And at the end of that bit, you get to a point of saying, well, I now recognize what my values are. I'm
Mhm.
starting to connect with myself and understand these are my values and this is what's important to me. And those values are, we use them to decide who we're friends with, we use them for all sorts of things, but those are quite clear. The second one is breathe. Recognizing what was in this story, this old narrative that was causing tension. What was the, what were the tensions? What were the things that I was holding on to, and where were they hitting me? And how can I, if in order to let go of those tensions, what would be my hypothesis for change?
Mhm.
What's the new narrative the new story, the new adventure that we want to go on? And when I'm saying I'm actually talking about as a collective, or together. The third one is grow. So we've now gone. I've now created a new value system, or recognized my own value system. I've created a hypothesis for change for the stories that I want, the thing that I want to do. The next is grow. So then you start to think, well, if I want to make this hypothesis real, how am I going to do this? I can't do this on my own. I need to find other people. That bit that I talk about co-curate, the curation. I need to find other people. I need to connect with others who have seen these similar patterns, different experiences. How can I start to connect and recognize, and like we talked about, step outside of my existing echo chambers, my bubbles, to meet
Mm.
people who have a different experience, different understanding, different knowledge and wisdom than I do, but still see the same story or the same pattern, because that will help you create your um, insights and the data and the knowledge, and you start to work out, okay, so what is our solution, what's the thing that we can create now out of this. And then the fourth one is flow. So this gets into the, how do I then start to think about this is going to be sustainable? How am I going to make sure that this is a we talk about states of flow, but not as an individual, but also as a society. How can we help the society get into a state of flow? What are the things that need to happen? And the last one is ground. How do you then scale that? How do you then scale it? But also, how do you turn it
Mm.
into a movement? How do you create a sense of citizenship and kinship? So, to your point of when we were talking about food, how do you make sure that you're bringing everybody with you, who um, not just those who can afford to pay?
Yeah.
So it's leave, breathe, grow, flow, and ground.
Wow. I love that framework.
And you
That's
can see it
amazing.
on the website. You can see it's on the ism.earth website.
Yeah, and I love how you answer the question, because I had no idea. I mean, I have kind of floating ideas on how we could evolve from the hero's journey, but this is a very clear roadmap, which is, it's beautiful, because I also feel that it hits home. I mean, it hit home right from the beginning when you say, well, you first have to start with yourself,
Yeah,
understand who you are,
yeah,
what you're here for, right? And there's a journey in that, and we
yeah,
all have different journeys, but there's a point in which you grow
yeah,
personally and understand yourself.
yeah,
And if anyone listening to this, if you don't understand how to get there, really just look it up and find mentors, find people who
yeah,
can guide you
yeah,
towards that personal uncovering, because a lot of folks go through life without even asking themselves the question,
yeah.
and that's kind of the norm right now.
And
and
what I would
and
also add is, we tend to do a lot of reading. There's reading, there's podcasts, there's also stuff. At some point, you need to stop and you need to act, and
yeah,
you need to turn that into action.
yeah, yeah, because we have so much information. It's like, if I don't
Yeah,
absorb enough, I'm not going to be
yeah,
ready.
yeah,
And that's true, that at some point it's really about the next steps, and then
yeah,
maybe we still keep on learning, we're eternal students. But this idea of arriving to a place of grounding if you have the roots and you have all these trees around you, I think someone here was making a beautiful, Andrea was making a beautiful metaphor with the bread, right? But with the forest also, like there's a mycelium that connects us, and then we root, then we can reach up and build something monumental together, right?
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, that's really inspiring. Thank you so much
that's
for
okay.
sharing that vision with you, with us, Adah. And I don't want to take too long of your time. We're already been on for over 40 minutes.
Oh wow,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, that went fast. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we leave it to close?
um, it's a real honor to be having this conversation with you on your platform and meeting some of the people who know you and inhabit your world. Um, I think that we should all, we. I've noticed that some people have mentioned it. The fact that the pandemic made us stay still is a very privileged response.
Mm,
it was, and it still is. And I think somebody mentioned in there that if we are coming from that place of privilege, then we also have a responsibility to lift others up, to
yeah,
do what we can to support others. And so, my request to the listeners, the viewers, is to recognize our privilege. All of us have it.
mm,
Recognize where it is and ask ourselves, the question, what kind of ancestor do we want to
absolutely.
be?
Absolutely. The problems we have in this world are so complex, and we tend to just look for easy answers. That is why
Yeah,
populism works, right?
yeah,
Because we just give lots of easy
yeah,
answers. Like,
yeah,
here's, I'm the
yeah.
solution. This is party is the solution, but there's no simple answers. That thing does not exist. And I love how you frame those complex answers in such an articulate way, and with almost like with a pathway, right?
Yeah.
But it is a journey that brings complexity, but it's also simple in just walking that process. So yeah, I'm grateful for what you shared with us, Ada. It's
Thank
been it's
you.
been wonderful. I look forward to connecting with you in the coming weeks and eventually
Yes.
seeing how post summer
Yeah.
we can eventually envision a date to collaborate on something somewhere
Yes.
in the
I
world. It would be an
definitely look
honor.
forward to it. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you
Thank you,
so much.
everybody, for listening and
Thanks
for
everyone.
viewing
Yeah,
and your
it's really
questions.
special.
Yes. Take care.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Ah, hold on.
Hey, we're back here
Yes.
on YouTube only. Well, that was really amazing. That 5-step journey is really something that I'm gonna write and have on my desk. I really
Yeah.
like it. Yeah.
It was always there. So I can tell you the process to get to that journey was that I created an alphabet for Cyborg Shamanism. It was a creative
Hmm.
exercise where a friend said, you start with A and you think of what is the word that will describe the connections that you see in those different places. And so anthropomorphic, balance, curiosity, diversity, and started to then did an A to Z and started to think about, but what is the journey that somebody who recognizes themselves as a cyborg shaman, or it feels weird saying someone recognizes themselves as a cyborg
Mm.
shaman, somebody who recognizes that what I was describing is part of their own journey, and so we're looking for what are the groupings, but also thinking about ancient wisdom and nature, so the elements: ether, air, fire, water, earth. And how do these words, these patterns that I'm recognizing, fit into the elements? And so
Mm.
that is how the framework came. And it's only in the last couple of weeks that I've been able to recognize that the words to describe them are leave, breathe. And breathe is so poignant right now with
Yeah.
everything. Yeah. Grow, flow, and ground.
Mm. Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, thanks again for sharing that with us, and um, I hope you have a beautiful end of day and week
Yes,
in
and
London,
you,
and in London,
and
and
you.
keep me posted with the updates around these. It was I've been following some of the, you know, I have to say, and I'm not sure if I said this already, but the conversation that you invited us to have a few weeks ago, maybe
Yeah.
over a month ago, was, and there's been a lot of Zoom calls in the past
Yeah.
months, as you may know, but that was one of the conversations that went the deepest, the fastest, and where I got most inspired by. So I wanted to thank you for creating that space,
Thank
and
you.
really, truly, you know, it was only like 6 or 7 of us,
Yeah.
but truly the holding of space, the calling out gently, the shifting the conversation was so. There was a lot of wisdom in the room, and very complementary in a way. So yeah, I can see how you feel. You know, the superpower is curation, and bringing these conversations together in such an important time. So I'm just, you know,
Thank you.
excited to be
Yeah,
connected.
I intend to do to organise a few more. I'm just working. I've got some deadlines to meet at the moment in terms of possible projects for this, but I intend to put together to curate some more of those discussions because what you experienced was phase one. That was the leave. So
Mm.
there's process within each one, but that was leave. So I'm really glad. Thank you for the feedback, and I will be doing some more soon and doing them so that other people can join or they can be a witness to part of that process as well.
Beautiful,
So look, have a
beautiful.
wonderful rest of the week,
Hmm.
and we will speak soon. I look forward to collaborating with you.
Same, Ada. Thank you so much. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.